Jumpin' In on Manx Radio.
With Howard and Chris Kane.
Hello.
Bonjour.
And welcome. And indeed, bonsoir tout le monde, as they say. Well, they do in certain parts of the world. In any case, it is Jumpin' In here on Manx Radio, 9 o'clock, Saturday night. Why are we speaking French, or French-esque, Franglish? Because we are heading across the continent this evening, celebrating BrujazzWe 2022. I'm H.
And I'm Chris. Well, the whitewashing's done, so I'm off up the road to go and put a sight in the bikes. But not for a while, because yes, TT22 is officially over. But fear not, Jumpin' In is still here. And this week we bring you our BrujazzWe Festival, as H was saying. The TT's not the only thing that's taken a 2-year sabbatical, but I'm glad to say that Brussels Jazz Weekend was back in the flesh with some 150 plus concerts spread across the city, covering nearly all the squares, open spaces, as well as most of the bars and cafes, not to mention Brussels' famous jazz clubs. And this year was a special celebration commemorating the 100th birthday, were he still around, of perhaps Belgium's best-known jazz export, Toots Thielman, pioneer of the chromatic harmonica as a lead jazz instrument and a pretty mean guitarist as well. And despite the weather being distinctly on the chilly side this year, the jazz was hot. So what was your cup of leffe this year, H, or perhaps the sauce on your frites?
Ah, yes, indeed. Most mayo on the frites, isn't it? So much good stuff again. Some you know, some you don't know. I hadn't come across Martin Salimi before, but I'll certainly listen to him again. Very nice indeed. We'll have a bit of him. We will have a bit of Elliot Nutz playing with the Brussels Jazz Orchestra, who are fine. There's 2 really good big bands, more of that in a moment. And maybe we'll get a little bit of Fabrizio Gracif and his quartet.
And for me, we ask why not, or do we? Andrew is a deer, and we wander through the abandoned marketplace buildings. But not before we take our place in the queue with the Jazz Station Big Band and Grégoire Marais. Don't butt in line. The fantastic jazz station Big Band, with a track they in fact opened their set on the Saturday in Brussels. Only in this time they had their own harmonica player with them who's part of the band, and on that one you've just heard was Gregoire Marais on harmonica and Don't Butt In Line from their 2021 album Live in Dinan, another great Belgian jazz festival which we've had the pleasure of attending. In fact, maybe we should go again. I was looking at this year's lineup.
We should go again.
Looks pretty good in July. No better way to kick off an evening, though, than with the harmonica centre stage for Toots. Marais, of course, has worked with many great jazz people, including Herbie Hancock, Pat Metheny, and despite having an always evolving lineup, they're the house band for the Jazz Station Club, which, as the name suggests, is an old railway station and one of the main jazz clubs in Brussels, and well worth a visit.
It's a terrific place. We sadly didn't get out this year. We have been out in previous years. The problem is, as is always the case of any festival goer might well tell you, unless the programme is scheduled in such a way you can go from A to B to C, which they often aren't because they're all sort of going on concurrently. So you basically have to choose what you want to see and either stay where you are and enjoy it, or you can, I suppose, choose to mix and match and see so much of one and then move to another and so much of another. But
the gig timings are all the same at each stage.
It is very difficult.
If you decide to move from one to another, you miss a set,
and,
don't you?
The Jazz Station, I think, isn't really a sensible walk. That's something, it's a little bit out of town. So
it's one for the midnight till 3 a.m. crowd.
So we didn't get there that time. But next time, you can't do them all, and there's so much on the Grand Place, as was this man, Martin Salimi, from big band to trio, not an artist I'd come across before, but again active on the jazz scene and recording, I think, for Igloo again, as so many of the great artists around that neck of the woods do. They had albums on sale there, so you're always tempted, aren't you, one way or another. I can never say no. This is his latest, I think. It's just called About Time, and the track is called Remembered. Very nice indeed. That one will be seeing a lot more of the turntable. When I say turntable, I mean CD player. A CD player, Grandad, I hear you say. Well, you know what I mean. Takes your pick. I still like the CDs. And yeah, wonderful sound indeed. The Martin Salimi Trio, About Time on Igloo, and has had a rave review, I noticed, from one of the French sites. An instant classic, says Philippe Baron from Music 3. Beautiful melodies, superb trio work, an instant classic, he puts it down. It looks like it also has one of the Jazzman Shock 4-star choices, so I think he's off to a flying start with this one. Prolific composer, he says on his own website he likes to get the truth out of every note, and he's somewhere in that territory, isn't he? Floating in between Keith Jarrett, EST, sort of obviously a hint of, well, aren't they all a hint of Bill Evans? Any piano trio, I think, is always going to have a hint of Bill Evans somewhere in the background if they play some of the quieter stuff. But really like that one, well worth checking out, and I think you can find that quite happily online, even if you don't get to Belgium. Martin on piano, and also he composed all the tracks, I think. Boris Schmidt double bass, Daniel Yonkers at the drums.
And in fact, we did play a track last week from his previous album. He's another one that was supported by the Lundi d'Hortense, a fantastic institution supporting young Belgian jazz musicians, and both albums well worth digging into. Now, next up from me, a Belgian jazz institution almost reaching the same status as Toots. Back in the 70s, he was seen as a young firebrand guitarist and often compared to McLaughlin. Fine words indeed. Crossing over into rock territory, he also took centre stage with Dutch rockers Focus. If you can remember the yodeling, you'll know what I mean. Who am I talking about? Well, Philip Catherine, of course. And in his 80th year, he's still going strong, although not all night at Sands Jazz Club this year, but a more civilised early setting in the Grand Place. Here's the title track from his latest trio project, Pourquoi. Lovely. Pourquoi? Indeed, the title track from Philip Catherine in trio format with his fellow guitarist Paulo Morello and bassist Sven Faller. And it has to be said, Philip has still definitely got the touch, and as the standing ovations in the Grand Place proved.
More than, yeah, he was just on cracking form and also very funny.
Yes.
He comes up with little one-liners, even though he's obviously French is his first language, but he still came out with some wonderful lines, a great joke, and then I think his parting line was, "I'd love to do an encore, but I've got to go to the laundrette."
He said, I've been having some troubles with my brain, and I went to see my doctor, and he said, "Philip, you know your brain is in two halves, the left brain and the right brain." And he said, "Well, I've looked at the left brain," and he said, "I'm sorry to tell you, there's nothing left." And I said, "Well, what about the right brain?" He said, "The right brain? No. The right brain, there's no." I got it the wrong way around. The left brain, there is nothing right. And he said, "The right brain, there is nothing left." Well, he did it a lot better than I did. Nonetheless, he was on great form.
I think you should go and check your right and left brain as well. Oh dear. It is Jumping In. It is a celebration of Belgian jazz as we come back, as we are back now here in the studio, of course, from BrujazzWe 2022. And a wonderful time is had by one and all. There are just so many wonderful artists. We were just talking as we were listening to that. We could fill several shows just with Belgian jazz artists, to be realistic, and the amount of talent out there is phenomenal. And I dare say it's probably true for Poland, for Norway, possibly for Spain as well. Certainly for Britain.
Strange thing, though, that some of this is still insular. It doesn't seem to be on labels other than local releases.
It could just be, to be honest, just the amount of talent out there. There's only, people have only got one pair of ears and so much time to listen to things, and the incredible amount of talent. As witnessed by this man, from a slightly older guitar player to a slightly younger guitar player on the Belgian jazz scene, Elliot Nutz, who was playing on the Grand Place again. I think he's got an album coming out. I don't know if it's been released yet, but he certainly has been playing with the Brussels Jazz Orchestra, another fantastic big band featured around in Brussels, of course, who were playing as well. And yeah, a terrific young player. He could be the next Philip Catherine. Who knows? Here they are with a track called Catherfingers. Elliot Nutz on guitar with the Brussels Jazz Orchestra, another fantastic Brussels-based band, along with the jazz station big band we heard earlier on, with the equally fantastic Natalie Laurier. I was so pleased to hear or see her play, and that she plays quite often in the piano chair, as she was this year in the Grand Place with the Brussels Jazz Orchestra, and always been a fan of her small band work. She was due to be with her own quartet or trio a couple of years ago, when of course COVID came in and everything was shut down, and so we never got to see the small band. But nice to see her playing piano with the big band in any case. Elliot himself, we were just debating again whether he was, a few years back we were at a gig at the jazz station, and a young lad came on and started jamming with a band playing there, and he seemed to play everything. He played drums, he played piano, he played guitar, he played sax. It might have been Elliot. I can't remember. It could well have been.
He was only about 12 at the time, but even now, Elliot is only 17, and we were fortunate to catch both those bands in a live setting. The only odd thing, every year we've been, they seem to open the Grand Place, which is one of the main sort of open venues, with something kind of really quiet trio or something, which is a strange way to open a festival, whereas that, and we did see both of those big bands, that's the way to kick off a festival for my money. Now, another album I've been really enjoying of late is Hurt, H-E-R-T, from young Belgian bass player and multi-instrumentalist Lara Rossiel. We didn't actually see her perform this time, but she was at the Brussels Jazz Festival back in January. Here's a track from her latest release, Hurt, Andrew. Andrew, taken from bassist Laura Rossiel's sophomore album Heart, which means stag or deer, doesn't it, in Dutch, on the Verf record label. A fascinating record, this, I think, moving from bluesy folk-feeling tracks to world music tracks via fast and funky full-on swingers. Sam Floymans on trumpet, we have seen him playing at Brussels a few years ago, actually, with a funk band. On trumpet and flugel, Vita Powells on guitar, Sepp Francois on vibes, percussion, waterphone, kalimba and Wurlitzer, and many other things. Angelo Mustafa on drums, and Laura Rossiel on the bass, as well as violin, vocals and percussion. And Verf, another great Belgian institution. Check out WERF Records for lots of different things, Belgian and jazzy.
They do have some terrific stuff on that label, it must be said. That and Igloo we've been hearing from as well, and this one on a Magna label, perhaps less often heard, but plenty of great artists on there as well. Picked this one up while we were there from the Lundi Lutins, their stall they always have in the corner. Happy to see them there again this year. Small selection of CDs from their artists, and this was a man who I wasn't aware was playing this year. He might have been in previous years. Fabrizio Grasifa with his quartet. Fabrizio with Pierre Bailin on a trumpet, Boris Schmidt on double bass, and Herman Pardon at the drums. It's on the notes, it says, inspired by the sound of musicians from the contemporary New York jazz scene, Fabrizio mixes the groove of jazz and rock with ethereal electro atmospheres, rhythmic loops as backgrounds for improvisation. I was hooked in any case. Have a listen to Back Home. One. Really enjoying that one. I'll be checking out the rest of that album. I haven't heard that all. The more I look at the album cover, the more I slightly worry I might have bought it in years past, which is always slightly worrying when you have too many CDs, as my better half would no doubt tell me. I can't believe I haven't played it more recently, if that's the case, but in which case you might be in for an early Christmas present. Very nice indeed, then. Back Home, that is called Fabrizio Graceffa Quartet, with, like I said, Fabrizio on guitars, electronics and loops, Pierre Bailin, trumpet, Boris Schmidt, double bass, Erman Pardin at the drums on Magna Music. Great stuff.
And so, to finish off tonight's show, and as it happened, the last act of the festival, the fantastic Urbex, the brainchild of drummer and composer Antoine Pierre. The name Urbex is a contraction of the words urban and exploration, he says, and he took his original inspiration from the abandoned buildings around Belgium. Featuring some of the top players on the scene, Bert Koels on guitar, Bram de Luce on piano and electronics, Sven de Loyne and Toyn Thies on clarinets and saxes, Jean-Paul Estevignat, who turns up in all those big bands, on trumpet and flugel, Felix Zastrusen on bass, Frédéric Malpré on percussion, and of course Antoine Pierre at the drums. Well, I won't waffle on anymore. We had plenty of those while we were there too. We hope you enjoyed our Belgian special. Make a diary date for BrujazzWe for next year, and we'll leave you with Metropolitan Adventure from Urbex's debut back in 2016. Au revoir.
Au revoir indeed. See you soon.
Thank you.